everyone. Welcome to Panorama 2022. My name is Karen Muma, and I will be your host for this evening. Tonight, we have 7 amazing student speakers. And before we start, I do want to send a big thank you to the Department of Communication, the Schaefer Center, and App TV for playing big parts in getting this presentation up and running. First up, we have Eli Benitez. She is a senior communication studies major, and she's going to be talking about community in Boone.
Thanks. A common stereotype we hear of the Appalachian South is that its population is made up entirely of poor whites. And from someone from a tight-knit Salvadoran community in a large city, even I had fallen into this bias when I first moved to Boone. But in recent years, we've seen a push for a change in this public perception with movements like Appalachia, a literary movement headed by Black artists and academics, and research projects like Las Voces de los Appalaches, which aims to document and spotlight the Latino community in the Appalachian region. So today I wanted to talk about how cultural identity influences our storytelling and how it builds a community. Community is pretty straightforward, the definition being a fellowship with others based on common attitudes and attributions and goals. Again, this definition is pretty straightforward, but I found that in practice, it's a little more complicated than it is in theory. Because of this my interest in the interconnection of cultural identity and community building, I found that I was interested in doing research on what connects us to other people and how that influences how we build communities. So over the last couple months, I've been researching and interviewing friends, family, community members about what it means to be from the South, but specifically what it means to be a Latino from the South. Throughout all my interviews and research, I found that one of the main commonalities that I saw was this longing for connection with other people. This manifested, of course, in a variety of ways, the first being sharing food and recipes, as well as sharing cultural customs and stories, even things as simple as sharing a physical space with other people. But the other commonality that I found within most of my interviews was this insecurity in a cultural identity. For example, the first person I spoke with told me how she often only saw her shortcomings when with other Latino students, how her Spanish wasn't good enough, or how she couldn't cook or dance well enough. And yet another student told me, as an undocumented student, she often felt too Latina for her American-born peers. And yet another student told me how she felt that she was too old to join her cultural community. All of these insecurities are often manifest because we build our identities through what separates us, what makes us different. But it's often when we begin to find commonality within our differences that we begin to build strong communities. When I first moved to Boone, I started applications and scholarships. I had marketed myself as someone who fulfills quotas. And with a diversity breakdown like this, it's kind of hard not to. Especially for me, as a person who fulfills a variety of different diversity quotas. You know, female, Latina, gay, first-generation student. I'm like a quadruple threat of underrepresented groups on campus. And yet, what I didn't realize then and do now is that when I had done this, I had painted myself a picture of a white Appalachia, of a white campus with me at the margins. I had fed myself this idea of a white Appalachia over and over again that I began to believe it. And in that, I had resigned myself to this isolation, a cultural isolation. Gerbner and Gross's research within Living with Television, the Violence Profile, tells us that representation is a symbolic, is social existence. So when we lack this sort of representation, it becomes a social annihilation of an entire group of people. I had believed in this lack of representation. I did not see myself represented here. And when you don't see yourself represented, it can lead to this isolation. But believe it or not, North Carolina isn't necessarily, just like the rest of the United States, is pretty diverse. North Carolina has 1 million Latinos living in it as well. And so unsurprisingly, the second most common spoken language is Spanish, followed very closely by Vietnamese. North Carolina as well has a variety of towns, regions, and communities that are built around entire immigrant populations. I myself grew up in an immigrant community within my large city, and yet I had exempted Boone from having any similarities to my hometown. People, what I found through my research is that we are just trying to find connection. But oftentimes we are bogged down by fear and insecurity of our cultural identity, and this fear leads us to isolation and not branching out. But oftentimes we think we are alone. But when you even just begin to look, you can find that there are already pre-established communities. Oftentimes we don't have to build them ourselves. For example, here on campus, there are a variety of communities already established and built. We have the Black and Asian Student Association, the Hispanic Association, a women's center, and a multicultural center. We even have even smaller groups within these large organizations. The Queer POC group, the Disability Club, even like women's support groups within the Women's Center. Oftentimes, we isolate ourselves because of this fear, when we don't have to. There are already these groups for us. And so in order to kind of spread this word that we are not alone, we must begin to cultivate narratives that say that we belong in these spaces. Not only do we belong in these spaces that we inhabit, but our voices and our stories matter as well. And so when we begin to believe and spread this story that we belong and that we matter, we open ourselves up to being embraced in community. And these communities often open our eyes to other perspectives and ways of seeing the world. Martin Luther King said, "Our goal is to create a beloved community. And this will require a qualitative change in our souls and a quantitative change in our lives." This means that in order to find these communities, in order to reconnect with other people, we must actively look for them. And in that, we get to redefine ourselves. Oftentimes, all it takes to find community and find connection is starting the conversation. Thank you.
What an amazing way to start the night. Next we have is Anna Lane, junior electronic media and broadcasting major, who's going to be presenting on dyslexia.
So today, in the next 10-ish minutes, I'm going to answer all of your questions about dyslexia. Like, what is it? What is it really? And why on earth is it spelled like that? So depending on how much you know about the topic, when I say dyslexia, you might think just getting your B's and D's backwards. You might think maybe it's an excuse for people to be like lazy or something, or maybe have no idea what I'm talking about. But either way, I hope that you learned something. So 15% of all Americans have dyslexia, and I am one of those. So what is dyslexia? The dictionary definition defines it as a general term for disorders that involve difficulty in learning to read or interpret words, letters, and other symbols, but does not affect general intelligence. However, it is mostly described by its symptoms, like getting your B's and D's backwards, maybe having trouble reading or writing, and forgetting letters when you write or read. And all those things are true, but this does not address the root of the problem, the brain. So what is it really? People with dyslexia, when they look at a page and they read, they don't physically see anything different. It is the way that the brain is processing the words that they are reading and the way that they're being decoded within the brain. So dyslexia is caused by a phonological processing problem within the brain, or getting what you're seeing when you read to the brain and through the brain and then understanding it and processing it. So let's talk about the brain. So inside your brain, you have the outer part, which is the brain's cortex. And inside this, you have these structures called columns, which are the little lines you can see right there. And then between those columns, you have your axons. And so all of the columns are connected by axons that connect to each one of them. And so for a dyslexic brain, let's say that if we enlarge that, the dyslexic brain, the columns would be about this far apart. But in a normal brain, they would be about this far apart. And so what is happening within that is that it is a longer route to get from one of the columns to the other. And this causes reading to be slower, writing to be slower, any processing to be slower, because it takes a longer amount of time to get from one to the other, because it's a further distance. And then it also goes through the axons. And since the axons are further apart, then the information has a tougher time getting from one of the columns to the next one. And so this is especially a problem when going from the left brain to the right brain. And people with dyslexia use their right brain a lot more than their left side of the brain. And this causes them to be good at things like abstract thinking, problem solving, and spatial reasoning, and also allows them to be more creative, more into the arts, more imaginative, and stuff like that. So these skills that people with dyslexia have by using their right brain more really translate well into jobs, such as jobs in the arts, entrepreneurship, and architecture. But these strengths don't usually translate into school, because in school, you have to use more of your left brain with facts, math, logic, and analysis. And so school is especially difficult for people with dyslexia because it is not really conducive to the type of learning that people with dyslexia thrive with. And so if people with dyslexia can thrive in the real world, then why can they not thrive in school? And like I said, this is because they are not given the right tools to thrive. And so I went to around 5 schools growing up, and only one-ish was really conducive for my learning and for me to thrive. And this is because they gave me the tools that would help me learn and would help other people with dyslexia learn as well. And so let's just talk about the things specifically in school that people with dyslexia don't really do well with. These would be things like spelling tests, quick math and multiplication, knowing those super quickly because in the brain it takes more time to process. And so being able to do the quick multiplication like that is very difficult. And then reading aloud, that can be very stressful since people with dyslexia aren't very strong readers to begin with. And then word problems, but I just don't think those are fun for anyone. So, and also reading large sections of book for homework because it takes more time to process and more time to understand what you're reading. So all of these are problems for people with dyslexia, but like, how can we solve this so people can thrive? It would really only take small changes that would benefit everyone and would help people with not just dyslexia to thrive. And they would be very inexpensive changes too. And these changes would look like less rote memorization. Maybe if you're trying to memorize a passage, have the person with dyslexia only have to do like some of it at one point and just work at a slower pace. Another thing would be enough time to complete assignments, given extra time, stuff like that. And also early testing would be a super big part because a lot of people don't even know that they have dyslexia. They struggle with school throughout their whole life and they don't know why. And so early testing in kindergarten or first grade would really help give kids the support that they need and recognize that there is a problem that can be worked on and so they can work on their strengths. Also, another thing would be more creative assignments, more hands-on stuff. And so if 1 in 5 people have dyslexia in a classroom of 30, that would be about 6 people. And so this is a large amount of people that are affected by this and would benefit from these changes. And we can't afford to have this many people's talent go by and not be realized because people with dyslexia are creative and free thinkers, and this would benefit our whole society if we helped support this group of people. So I hope that you have learned something, and for why it's spelled like that, I still do not know. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That was great. I like that she taught us that dyslexia is more than just mixing your letters. There's a scientific root to it, which is exciting. Next up, we have Elliot Klappenbach. He is a sophomore electronic media and broadcasting major, giving us some insight about stadium funding.
Good evening. So as evident by my major, you can tell that I'm pretty into sports. Whether it's playing them, watching them, anything to do with sports, I'm pretty invested in. But what's not as evident by my major is the fact that I care about my community and what my taxes are doing to help out my community. These two interests and values of mine is why I care about sports stadiums and where the money that builds them comes from. The concern I have is that almost all stadiums use some type of public funds to help them get built. So to get started, let's look at the problem. This is just a chart here. It's showing the percentage of public to private money that's put into NFL stadiums. To point out a few, the Los Angeles Rams stadium here is completely privately funded. And the Oakland Raiders is one of the more expensive ones, and almost half of it is public money that goes into it. So public funding is being used to build these massive, multi-million and even multi-billion dollar stadiums. The owners of sports teams are given public subsidies that can come in many different forms. These forms being tax exemptions of many kinds, including property tax exemptions, grants, which are basically just checks that are handed to the owners, or fee waivers. A common argument is that stadiums bring money into the area, and so it's justified to have cities pay for them. Well, according to data from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis and many other studies, cities and metro areas that have invested heavily in sports stadiums and arenas have, on average, experienced slower income growth than those that have not. Now, Buffalo Bills owner Terry Pegula is a prime example of another problem that publicly funded stadiums bring about. Terry Pegula is threatening to move the Buffalo Bills if he doesn't get help from the city of Buffalo to help pay for it. Now, Terry Pegula is worth $5.7 billion. That's way more than enough to pay for it himself. Right now, he's looking to build a $1.1 billion stadium, which again is worth 5.7, so he has well more than enough money. Now, this is the Chiefs Stadium, Arrowhead. This stadium costs $43 million, and it is the 7th largest stadium in the NFL. So it's one of the cheaper ones and one of the largest, going to show you can build a cheaper stadium that's still fully functionable and one of the better stadiums in the NFL. Now I'm going to pause for a minute. I've been saying a lot of different numbers so far, from millions to billions. And some of you may be asking yourself, what exactly is $1 billion? I know $1 billion can be hard to fathom, so I did some conversions for you. $1 billion can buy you 200 million cookout trays. That's enough cookout trays for everyone in North Carolina to buy 28. But what if instead of putting that money into cookout trays, you put it into something more beneficial for the community? $1 billion can buy over 333 million meals for children whose families might struggle to get food on the table. Again, that's 33 meals for everyone in North Carolina. So now that I have an idea of what exactly $1 billion is, I'd like to bring up another point. Some people also argue, saying that some owners just aren't as rich as others and actually need help from the city to help stadiums get built. But this just doesn't exactly line up. This is SoFi Stadium. This is the most expensive stadium in the world, coming in at $5.5 billion. This is the Los Angeles Rams Stadium. If any of you watched the most recent Super Bowl, this is the stadium that they played in. Now, Stan Kroenke is the owner of this stadium and the Los Angeles Rams, and he paid for it completely by himself. Stan Kroenke is worth $10 billion. So over half his net worth went into building this stadium. Now, the poorest owner in the NFL is Mark Davis, worth $500 million. He is the owner of the Oakland Raiders. And there are many ways for people like Mark Davis to pay for a stadium, since he doesn't have as much money as someone like Stan Kroenke or a lot of the other owners in the NFL. One super easy way to get money to help build a stadium is to get a sponsor. A sponsor such as SoFi for SoFi Stadium, or Bank of America for Bank of America Stadium down in Charlotte. SoFi and Bank of America pay hundreds of millions of dollars to have their names up on the stadiums. SoFi paid Stan Kroenke $625 million to have their name on the stadium for only 10 years, while Bank of America paid $120 million for 20 years. So after that contract is over, you can just make a new contract and make hundreds of millions of more dollars. And let's not forget about ticket sales throughout the years. So in conclusion, stadiums more than pay for themselves. But if this money isn't going to fund stadiums, then where's it going to go? One option is parks. Parks are built quite unevenly throughout a city. According to a study done by Brookings University, people living in poverty are far less likely to live near a park. To build a simple park with a playground and a grass field, it costs on average $100,000. Now this here is Kilworth Optimist Park. It's in Ontario, Canada, and it's just a simple design. Has a small playground, a grass field behind it, where kids can maybe kick a soccer ball, throw a frisbee, play tag. This type of park would cost on average 100,000. Now, if you take the $87.5 million that was just given to David Tepper, owner of the Charlotte Panthers, to renovate his stadium, then that's over 875 parks that you can build in and around the city of Charlotte. That's plenty of parks to make one accessible to everyone in the city. So let's just take a minute and think how much better off cities could be if they use hundreds of millions of dollars elsewhere in a city, instead of putting that money, your money, into stadiums that will get built anyways by rich owners. Thank you.
That really puts cookout trays into perspective, doesn't it? So next we have Grace Smith, junior journalism major, and she's going to be presenting about COVID-19 burnout.
Hi there, y'all. How are you doing today? Good? Awesome. My name is Grace, and today I'm going to be giving you a presentation called Rekindling the Coals. Reviving the Coals, sorry. This is me, right before COVID happened. I was on spring break with some of my best friends, and that's going to become a whole lot more relevant once I get into the presentation. So without further ado, it was right before spring break of 2020 when I first thought that my life could be very different in the upcoming years. I was sitting in my room with some of my closest friends, and we were talking about this virus that was just running rampant all over the world. We heard that this virus was shutting down countries, so instantly my first thought was, oh my God, they're gonna send us home. I'm gonna have to go home with my little sisters who are running around being crazy every day. I'm not gonna have independence. My life is over. Oh my God. But I've always had the tendency to be a tad nihilistic, so I let my friends talk me off the ledge. They told me that there weren't even that many cases in the States yet and that this was extremely unlikely of happening. So we went on spring break, we enjoyed our time, but that last day of spring break, we got the news that I had been dreading. Me and my closest girlfriends were going to a restaurant, just trying to enjoy our last day of spring break, and we walked inside of this restaurant, and the two hosts were talking about how cases of COVID-19 were popping up all over Charleston. We were in Hilton Head for spring break, and Charleston and Hilton Head are really not that far from each other, so my first instinct is to go on my phone and Google South Carolina's COVID count. That led me down a rabbit hole, and then I started looking at North Carolina's COVID count, Tennessee's COVID count, and Alaska's for some reason, I'm not sure. But what I learned was that North Carolina did not have any cases at the time. My first thought was, oh my gosh, we must be in some super safe quarantine bubble. We're not going to get sent home. Everyone else is, but we'll be fine. Obviously, I was a little bit naive because during that exact same lunch, I went to check my phone again, and I saw an email from our Chancellor, Sherry Everts. It said that spring break was going to be extended by 2 weeks while we deal with this deadly virus. Now, at this point, my hope did start to dwindle, but it wasn't completely crushed because it was just an extended spring break. That's just extra vacation. At the end of those 2 weeks, there's no way they wouldn't let us come back. But little did we know, during this time, our professors would be transforming their entire in-person curriculum to fit an online standard, not only for that rest of the semester, but for the foreseeable future. When I sat back down at my computer to resume classes, I didn't know it would be another 1.5 years before I even set foot in a classroom again. I'm not going to lie, at first online classes were a blessing. I mean, I was taking a very heavy course load, so I felt a lot less stressed with taking my classes online. I could spend my time doing other more productive things, like daydreaming that I was back at college with my friends. I mean, if I closed my eyes and I turned on trap music loud enough, it almost felt like I was going out with my friends instead of surrounded by my room in a bed full of tissues. Oh my God, y'all don't need to see that, sorry. But soon online classes started feeling like less of a blessing and more like a prison. Because when I sat down to resume my classes at the beginning of the fall semester of 2020, I I knew that things were going to be different. I knew that we weren't going to be in person that year, even though the university was trying to keep our hopes up. I knew that things were not going to be the same. I mean, that year, that first semester, I only had 2 classes that were even synchronous. Everything else I had to do myself. I had to pace myself. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm the kind of person who academics, they haven't always been easy for me. I had to work really hard when I was a kid to get to where I am today. But when COVID started, I could feel 15 years of classroom conditioning just slip down the drain. Studying became a foreign concept because all of our professors were trying to be easy on us, letting us have online exams, letting us have open note exams. So I didn't study for a year and a half. I'm still having trouble right now getting back into my study habits, getting back on track to where I used to be. Y'all should see my cue cards right now. I forgot how to write by hand. This is chicken scratch. I'm not even reading. I promise you. It soon became all too easy just to sleep until class started, turn on my computer, turn on the Zoom, turn off my camera, roll back over onto my pillow, sleep through every single class that I had. And to any of my old professors who might be in the audience today, and this is a communication department event, so I know that you are. I'm sorry you're having to hear this, but at least at this point I was still doing my homework, because soon after that, the depression hit me. Intrusive thoughts like, is life ever gonna go back to normal? And who is gonna hire somebody who went through all of their college online? Plagued my brain every single day. And as I would sit down at my computer staring at the COVID dashboards for App State, I grew helpless. I remember FaceTiming my brother around this time and telling him that COVID produced a hopeless time. And it did so for everybody. I have here a graph of depression statistics for pre-COVID and during COVID. As you can see here, the yellow bar represents before COVID-19. The turquoise bar represents during. And now obviously there's always going to be less people struggling with depression than those who aren't. But if you look at the mild, moderate, moderately severe, and severe categories, it was unprecedented. I started seeing these national trends with my friends as well. My friends who, like me, were very academically driven at one point in their life started to slack on their academics as well. And even though we would all get together to brainstorm ways to hold each other accountable, brainstorming study techniques, just ways to get each other to class, everything we tried would fail. So we stopped trying. My friends stopped trying, I stopped trying. We were just burnt out, and there was no way to rekindle the coals. But you see, it wasn't just my friends. Obviously, this was a national thing, but I want to focus specifically on App State. A study conducted by App State's Student Government Association on grade reports from the fall semester of 2020 revealed that 97% of App State students felt as though COVID negatively impacted their academic performances. Here's a graph that represents this, but I've never really been the kind of person that likes looking at a graph, so I'm going to ask you all to close your eyes, please. And I know every single public speaker is going to ask you to close your eyes and visualize something, but bear with me here. I want you to picture in your head 20,023 people, because that's how many people went to App State the fall semester of 2020. And now in your head, I want you to isolate and single out 19,422 of those people. If you're having trouble doing this, it's because it's actually impossible to physically think about numbers that big, and it was kind of just a quick trick question, but this is what that looks like. This is a stadium of 20,000 people, and that is approximately how many people at App State were suffering academically because of COVID-19. And to that other 3% of you who said that you weren't struggling, I just want to know your secret. Are y'all some mental superhumans or something? You might need to come find me after this so that we can chat and exchange strategies or something. But it wasn't just the students either. In preparation for this speech, I interviewed and talked to several faculty members about their experiences with COVID-19 too, and there was a common trend in their responses to me. The one that resonated the most, and I want you to sit with this, is that COVID is the most devastating thing to happen to this university since 9/11. That's insane. But it wasn't just the academics either. For 2 months between social distancing regulations and curfews, we really were limited on how much social interaction we could have. So for 2 months, I pretty much only talked to my roommate. Every night when we first moved into our apartment, I would hear her sobbing from the room next door through our super thin walls, and that's how I knew that she could hear me too. And while that is embarrassing, it was a big focal point for this speech. You see, when I was writing this speech, I didn't just want to focus on my experience with COVID, but I wanted to talk to people about theirs as well. So like I interviewed faculty, I also interviewed several of my peers. I wanted to see what was causing their burnout as well as mine. And throughout everyone I talked to, they all said, I just felt so alone. Alone. Even though we were all going through the same thing at the same time, for the first time, all together, we were alone together. I was talking to my roommate one time in preparation for this speech, and I asked her, hey, did you ever hear me sobbing in my bed from across your room? And she laughed because it's an awkward question before responding, yeah, I did. I could hear you crying. And then I responded back to her, well, I could hear you too. And there was a little awkward pause. She didn't know what to respond. Fair enough. But I asked her, what made you feel like you couldn't come talk to me about what it is you're going through? And she sat there and she thought about it for a little while before responding, I know that you were going through one of the hardest times in your life. And I was going through one of the hardest times in my life. And I didn't want to burden you with my issues. She didn't want to be a burden. When everyone is going through the same tough time, it can be impossible to talk about. I mean, you don't want to burden your family members when they're at their all-time low. You don't want to burden your friends when they're doing terribly. COVID-19 was that all-time low for so many people. And so I started writing this speech, part of me hoping that I would find a cure to my own burnout, part of me hoping that I would find a cure to burnout in general. And ladies and gentlemen, I did it. With 100% guarantee, I found the solution. I'm just kidding. There's no perfect solution that's going to work for everybody, but I do have some strategies that have really helped me. The first thing that I had to do was I had to rely on my support system again. I couldn't just keep doing this by myself. So I had a little bit of a breakthrough. Let me correct myself. It was more like a breakdown at the end of the spring semester of 2021. It was final exam period, and I had a bunch of exams, an entire semester's worth of work for an asynchronous class that I hadn't even attempted to start. Sprinkle in some missing homework there, some essays there, and just the general chaos of my depression cave that had morphed around my room in the months of COVID. I just couldn't focus on the things that I needed to get done. I sat down in front of my computer, and all I could think of was, this isn't me. How did I get here? And I can't bring myself out of it. So I turned to the only person who I could rely on for support, which was my little brother. And I just vented to him for hours about how stressed I was, about how sad I was, about how disappointed in myself I was. And at the end of that conversation, he gave me some great advice, but it wasn't even the advice that helped me. It was the venting. Getting out all of these negative thoughts that had been trapped inside of my head for a year and a half, putting them into the universe, getting them out of my system, getting them somewhere else aside from my brain, allowed me to sit down and do all of the homework that I had been putting off. Now, my advice to you is not to go trauma dumping on your family members and loved ones. Please don't do that. But there are ways that you can healthily vent without even relying on other people. So I'm going to recommend journaling. And I know that's what every mental health professional tells you to do, but it really does help. I want to introduce to you a study done by Psychosomatic Medicine from 2013. A group of researchers took some participants and told half of them to journal about tasks, about their daily task management, and told the other half of them to journal about things that were generally upsetting to them. After 2 weeks, they brought in all of the participants and performed a small biopsy on their arm. Over the next few days, the researchers brought the participants back in and were monitoring the healing of the biopsy. After day 11, 76% of the people who were journaling about things that were generally upsetting to them, the biopsy had been completely healed. To compare, only 46% of the people who had been journaling about daily task management had been completely healed. And now, the goal of this study was not to tell you that journaling is going to solve all of your problems and heal all of your wounds and everything is going to be great. But it was done to show that there are positive health correlations to getting out negative feelings and emotions. I can almost guarantee, if I relied on my support system sooner, if I had started journaling, if I had gotten those negative thoughts out of my system sooner, my experience with COVID-19 burnout might not have been so bad. And so to wrap up this speech, I want to read you an excerpt from my journal from March 7th of 2022. I just went outside today because I felt like going for a walk. People were walking their dogs, children were playing on the playground. I feel like the earth is healing. If there's anything that you're going to take away from my speech today, it's that you can't do it alone, and you can do it with the help of others. Thank you.
I think we can all relate to what Grace was talking about with COVID-19 burnout. But next, we have sophomore and electronic media broadcasting student Jenna Dunning, who talks about incorporating sexual identity into youth education.
All right. Today, I'm here to give you all a talk. Now, before you collect your bags and start locating your nearest exit, I promise this one should be a lot less awkward than the one you're thinking of. Today, I'm here to discuss the benefits saying gay will have on the future generations of our society. Incorporating sexuality into our children's education will decrease homophobia, prevent depression and suicide in young queer teens, and overall make this world a happier, safer place for queer individuals. Now, growing up in my large Italian, Catholic, loud, opinionated family, hey guys, was everything but boring, to say the least. I believe the only time my family was quiet is when they place food on the table. Tends to shut everyone up real quick, because, gotta get into it. So, as every other teenager, or I guess at this point, adolescent, I wanted to stay under the radar. I wanted to just be like my cousins and my siblings. I didn't want to do anything that would put me right into the controversial spotlight. So, you can imagine how my heart dropped to my ass when I realized I was gay. Essentially, coming out would have put me directly under that spotlight. So, I decided I would hang out in the closet for a little bit. Now, for those of you who are unaware of what it's like to be in the closet, I have a short anecdote. Have you ever gone to the store and you've been looking for this pair of shoes that you've wanted for the longest? You're like, ooh, I want them Blazers, the Nike Blazers. So you go up, you're looking through Dick's Sporting Goods or wherever you are, and you find them. You're like, yes, those are them, in the perfect color too. Hell yeah. And you're looking, you're like, oh, damn, they have a size smaller than me. Well, I have the money, and I want the shoes, so I'm going to go ahead and buy them. So you buy the shoes, they're a size small, you put them on, and, you get your foot in, you can walk around in them. You're like, yeah, I'll take them. I worked hard. They're my shoes now. Go home, next day, wake up, it's the first thing you put on. Make sure your outfit goes with them shoes, But you walk around all day, you get compliments. People are like, hey, that's pretty cool. You're like, yeah, I know. Just bought them. And you're still getting compliments. You feel good. Your self-confidence goes straight up. And you get home and you're finally like, oh, okay. Let me take off these shoes. As you take them off, you look down and you have blisters on your feet. But you know what? I spent money on these shoes, right? I put in work to get these shoes. So I'm gonna go ahead and put them right back on. And you continue walking around in them, and the blisters start to hurt a little worse every day. But I worked hard for these shoes, and I want people to like my shoes and how I look. So I'm gonna keep walking in these shoes until it becomes unbearable. This is what it's like to be in the closet. Now, according to Pew Research, technology, work with me, come on. There we go. According to Pew Research, if you look at this underlined portion, the median age for when queer individuals began to question their sexuality was between ages 10 and 13 and rounded at 12. So let's think for a second. Let's think. What else happens between ages 10 and 13? Ding. You know, that time when kids go from being like squishy and cute to awkwardly proportioned, and if I'm gonna be honest, a little smelly. Puberty. Woohoo! Everyone hates it, no one likes it, and it's just the worst. Well, during puberty, our bodies are obviously not the only thing that's changing. Our mental state and how we perceive the world around us is also changing. So, why are we only discussing the physical changes that will happen to our kids? Why are we leaving out this huge portion of the entire part of puberty? We're just ignoring it. Now, this next data set, I would like you to pay attention again to this underlined portion. Now, this data set explains the age when when queer individuals first told a close friend or family member that they might be gay. On average, the average amount of people said that they were 20 years or older, so that's adulthood. So I'm going to do some math here. You first start questioning your sexuality. Let's say I'm gonna round up around age 13, right? Then you come out. Hell, I'll round down. Come out around age 19. That's 6 years. 6 years wearing shoes that are too tight. 6 years pretending to be someone you're not. 6 years contemplating whether or not it's worth it to walk around on this earth if you can't be who you are. 6 years alone. The Trevor Project, an article I read recently, states that queer teens are 4 times more likely to commit suicide. Yeah, I know that's a big word. I know it's a scary word, but it's one that needs to be heard. 4 times more likely to take their life, to remove themselves from this earth. Not double, not triple, but 4 times. What kind of chance do we have? Imagine telling your kid those are their odds. They could never. It's absolutely unacceptable. And if society has come such a long way, why are we still being silenced in places like Florida? The prejudices that silence us stem from one thing: fear. Now, a while back, and I'll admit, still a little bit now, I used to be petrified of storms. To the point where I'd just freak out, run away. I mean, I'm sure I could go on a rant about all the times that I've truly had anxiety attacks due to a little thunder. But my dad told me, if you're so scared of something, what you need to do is educate yourself. Understand everything about this topic so you'll have nothing to fear anymore. Don't stay in the dark. And this directly applies to my speech: homophobia, racism, and any other prejudice you have towards somebody else. You see, humans aren't scared of the dark. We fear what's in it. We fear the unknown. Debashis Merida, I can get this quote up, is a published author and philosopher, and he lends us some insight. He states, "Fear comes from the lack of knowledge and a state of ignorance. The best remedy for fear is to gain knowledge." So, with that being said, we can understand that in order to stop prejudices like homophobia, racism, and anything else you want to add to that list, We have to educate others. Now, I'm in no position to tell you how to go about running your family. In fact, that would just be absolutely unreasonable. So I'm not going to do that. But I will say, if we already have to sit our kids down for an awkward conversation around ages 10 to 13, where we talk about some pretty explicit stuff, if I'm going to be honest, why not just incorporate sexuality into that conversation? It's an easy gateway just to be able to make those queer teens feel accepted, make them feel a little less alone, make them feel like they are normal. Because at the end of the day, we are. We're just like every single one of you. So I beg all of you and anyone who thinks about having a family or raising kids or anywhere in that range, brothers to sisters, sisters to brothers, all that in between, please help educate others about sexuality and gender identity. Kids have too much pressure from social life, academics, sports, family life. I mean, the list goes on and on. They go through so much pressure. And questioning their sexuality and being alone through that process is one more that they do not need. It is time to say gay, loud and clear. It is time to say gay to enable our queer community to have a chance in the society, to decrease homophobia, to decrease suicide rates, and to overall make this world a much safer, happier place for our queer individuals. And thank you.
If I were you, I'd listen to Jenna. So next up, we have sophomore Philip Spurzens. He is studying finance and banking, and he's going to be talking about consciousness and quantum physics. So hang in there. This one gets interesting.
Well, thank you all for being here.
Our speeches aren't that long.
Today we're going to talk about some complicated topics, but bear with me, it all has to do with your experience and your life. We are talking about the essence, the motivating force behind everything that happens, the electron. This is because electrons have to go through all these funny little states of switching between solid states and liquid states and gaseous states. In fact, in order for anything to happen, there has to be a chemical reaction or a physical reaction. This all requires a transfer of electrons. So I like to think of these guys as the little motivating force behind what makes life happen. And in large, what makes you do anything you decide to do. There was, in a relatively recent scientific experiment called the double slit experiment, it proved that electrons are both waves and particles. Well, what does that even mean? Well, essentially, how they figured this out was they took an electron beam with a large enough diameter that it was smaller than these two lines and shot it through. And just like a light, you would expect shadows in the end, correct? With two distinct lines. Well, what we found was that there are actually few lines that are stronger and some that are weaker, a little more faded. And photons of light have the same relationship. And why that is because of this nifty little chart. These mark the positions of these electrons. So as they shoot 1,000 electrons through these little splits, one appears here, one over here, one over here. They make this little diagram showing you that they are waves. They don't just show up they're not a direct line of light. It is a wave of light. Wave and particle duality. This is the unique part of these electrons. And if we imagine space and time, let's say this is what you're experiencing. Let's say we're all in the center right now listening to my speech. And the y-axis is moving forwards, saying forwards in time, because you'll never come back to this moment, what electrons essentially do, they move like waves, like this, in and out of time. Quite a bizarre idea, right? How do you move outside of time, outside of this timeline? Well, we can't experience that, but this is some theories that people have in string theory, that we have parallel universes, possibly. This little chart can exemplify that. And some people think this is just God, and you can't explain science past this point, because we actually don't have any other evidence past this point, once you get faster than the speed of light, which is the speed of an electron as well. So quantum theory, what this complicated stuff I'm talking about, can boil down to this thought. I'm assuming most of you drove here with a car, and your car is probably in the parking lot, right? And how confident are you that your car is still there? Probably pretty confident, right? Well, electrons, this little thing that makes up all of us, have this property where they are 1 second there and 1 second not. Only when things get bigger do we know that the objects are still there. Quite an abstract thought. This is all theoretical. You don't experience life in this way. You don't experience things disappearing. Your car will still be there, hopefully, when you go back. If you were an electron, if you shrunk down to experience life as an electron, this is what it would look like. It looked like some lines that look pretty much identical, let's say instances in time. Let's say this is when you were born, you had some other major events going down the line. If you were an electron, you would have the ability to be here and decide, okay, I'm going to walk over to this tree line, this timeline, and see what it's like there. If you were an electron, you could even go backwards. So you can go from this point back to here. This is just how they work. And there are actually pretty interesting videos where they take electrons, the picture of an atom, and you see them there, and they're doing all these motions, these random moving around. They start going forwards, then they start going backwards. This traditional science doesn't quite show this, but it is a cloud around an atom. So how does this relate to you? We're not electrons. Well, I'm going to draw a little parallel between electrons, motivating force behind everything that happens, and your human brain. If you guys, what you perceive, everything that you perceive is right behind your eyes and in between your ears, correct? You are experiencing the present moment right here. And you continue you make decisions, the decisions that you make impact your future. So, knowing this, your brain also switches between different wavelengths. When you go to sleep, your brain will switch between delta, gamma waves. If you're doing some particular task that take a lot of cognitive ability, you might be switching between theta and various different wavelengths. This is what your brain does. It functions as a central point where you engage your life, and as a wave that makes you decide what you want to do. So, unluckily, or I like to think it's actually even better, we move linearly in time. You mess up, you can't go back to that moment and fix that moment, but that's a good thing. And here's why. We'll never go back to 2020. We'll never go back to 2021. I'm sure you all are glad that we're not going to do that. But we're going into the future, into the sunlight. And everybody has dreams of having a better life in the future. Well, here is what quantum theory is telling you. So this electron, let's just say it's action. It's what you decide to do. It's where you put your energy towards. Let's decide that in 5 years you want to make $1 million. Well, You don't know how that's quite going to pan out, but let's just take the idea and set it out in time. The quickest way between 2 points is a line. And again, luckily we're going linearly forwards, never backwards. If you take this idea, move it out, and just envision it, every day along the way, if you find yourself present into that moment, right? Thinking about it, believing that you are on this path to get to this point, eventually you should arrive there. This is math, correct? I just told you guys all about this. Well, I'm going to leave you with an interesting quote that I'm sure you have heard parallel versions of, create with your mind, or your mind is so powerful. But I love this quote in particular. We may not be responsible for the world that created our minds, but we can take responsibility for the world with which we create, for the mind with which we create our world. Kind of messed myself up there a little bit. Thank you.
He put two very opposite concepts together. It's beyond me. But last and certainly not least, we have senior Donovan Berger, a public relations and marketing major, who is going to be presenting on the magic of screwing up and starting over.
So I'm sure everybody has a story in life where they've screwed up and they're starting over, but this one is mine. So growing up, I think it was age like 6 or 7, I told everybody I wanted to be a paleontologist, and I actually pronounced it correctly. So the bar was set pretty high as a 6-year-old for what I was going to be when I grew up. Moving into high school, I was like, science and math are my strong suits. Where am I going to go from here? And all of a sudden you're 16 years old and they say, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's time to pick your career path. So I looked around, and at some point I think I saw Meredith Grey looking back in the mirror at me. And I was like, okay, so we're going to go to medical school. We're going to try that one out. And I decided that I was going to further my education at this little town called Greenville, North Carolina, at East Carolina University. And the rumors are true. It does actually smell like that. So I was a biology major, pre-med, and I was really excited to kind of jump in both feet first and further my career path to go into surgery, maybe PA school. I don't know. I was 17. ECU has a super, super competitive medical program for anybody who's not super familiar with it. They actually had over 1,000 applicants that were internal applicants from their undergraduate program in 2018, and they only accepted 125. So I knew that this was going to be like a really competitive program for me to kind of compete in, but I was excited. So I get down there and I'm like, what am I going to do? I need to get involved in every way possible. So I was like, I'm going to get involved on campus. I rushed a sorority, I joined a couple clubs, and I loved my life freshman year down there. It was so much fun. And it might have been my extracurricular activities that I was doing on the side. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But I had a great time. Sophomore year rolls around and things kind of ramp up a little bit. And I remember stepping foot in my organic chemistry classroom, and my professor was like, oh, just, here's the grading scale. And a 50 was passing the class, a 50. So that kind of tells you, anybody who's taken organic chemistry, they know that's one of the hardest classes that exists. And it was so unbelievably hard. And it kind of wore me down. It breaks your soul a little bit. And you're like, I don't think I like this anymore. And that was the place that I became. And I said, I don't think I like this anymore. Let's see if I have another one. And it made me understand why 40% of US college students drop out before they graduate. So whether or not it was a snowball or it hit me all at once, I woke up and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I felt like a failure. I felt like I couldn't even tell the people around me how much I hated my life at that moment. And this fear of failure is something that is huge right now, especially with social media that we see every day. In our generation, we compare ourselves to each other. There was a recent study done actually in New York University. They asked freshmen, probably graduated like 2017, 2018. They said, what are you afraid of the most? 31% of people said that they were most afraid of spiders, realistic. 15 were afraid of the dark, 11 of snakes, 11 said their biggest fear was their parents. But the largest percentage of students answered and said their biggest fear in life at that time was failure. How do you admit that you failed? You don't have to necessarily academically fail something to feel like you've screwed up. How do you tell the people around you that care about you, that are cheering on your success, that you need to take a step back because you're not in the right place anymore? Not only have you let yourself down, but you feel like you've let down those who put so much faith into your success. It took several months for me in that low place to feel like I can maybe start over again and find new goals. Because I think one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is that once you've failed at something once, it's so hard to be able to encourage yourself to try something new and try again. So when I decided to transfer to App, I had a lot of fear inside of me, and I was afraid I was going to screw up again. And while it's a really exciting feeling to feel like you're good at something again, it's also terrifying because you still remember how it felt when you let everyone around you down. So there's always going to be like that voice in the back of your head that kind of holds you back. And my voice is one that compares me to everybody else. I see pictures people are posting, I hear their stories, and I really struggle with still being proud of my own successes, which I'm sure everybody else can kind of relate to. And even though I'm only like 24, anybody over 30 will be like, oh, you're so young, or, like back in my day, the whole like 10 miles uphill both ways kind of stories. But I think what people forget is that even though I am only 24, I'm still 2 years behind all of my peers. So for the last 2 years, I've seen their new apartments and their new jobs in big cities. I've seen their big girl paychecks, which would be nice. I see their diplomas. I see their $15 specialty cocktails that they get after their 9 to 5, which really stings, when I'm walking up the King Street wind tunnel at 8 a.m., still trying to get that undergraduate degree that I've been working on for like 6 years. So I kind of question time to time, am I in the right place? And the answer is you're always in the right place because everybody has their own path. So you might ask, am I doing the right thing for me? And the answer is probably yes, even though it sucks to see everybody else doing something different. But you can enjoy the high points of your life if you don't have a low point to compare it to. So even though it's really, really terrifying, learning to take pride in your successes and your failures is one of the most beautiful parts of your 20s. Thank you.
Alrighty, so before we go for tonight, I do want to acknowledge all of the hard work that these 7 amazing speakers have done and the work of Dr. Richards and everyone who has been a part of making this happen. Dr. Richards was the one who spearheads this whole thing, and he makes all the communication about it, and he's the one that edits and trains and puts this all together. So big round of applause for Dr. Richards. Alrighty, and then if I could have the 7 speakers come out for one last round of applause. They were super big. They had to, first of all, audition for this process. They had to perform it for Dr. Richards multiple times, and then they had to practice here this morning at 11 o'clock, and here they are. Yay! Good job. That is all. Again, big thanks to the Department of Communication, Dr. Richards, these speakers, and Schaefer Center and App TV for making this all happen. Have a great night.
I wanted to give you some information about our Appalachian State online MBA program. Our Appalachian State online MBA program is a 2-year program. The way we set it up is that you will take 2 classes per semester. So we have students come in every fall. That means you will take 2 classes in fall, 2 classes in spring, 2 classes in summer, and this again continues another year. So this is the way we have set up our program. Keep in mind though that this 2-year program can be customized in any way you want. So for example, if you are thinking of taking only 1 class per semester, we can set up your program to essentially reflect that particular instance. Or we can also say that you might want to take more than 2 classes per semester. You can take 3 classes or 4 classes per semester if you so desire. So the entire idea is that this program can be customized in any way you want. The classes for our online program, first of all, keep in mind that this is a completely online program. There is no physical presence required in the campus at Appalachian. So your classes can either be synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous classes essentially mean that the classes would meet virtually once a week, maybe on a Wednesday or a Monday or a Tuesday, any day of the week. But usually whenever the meeting is set, it's usually set in the evening so that working professionals can attend the class. So the meeting would be once a week via Zoom. Okay, the professor would conduct a class or have a class discussion or discuss a case study or what have you, but it would be once or twice a week depending on the professor's preference. An asynchronous class essentially is one that does not have any set meeting times. So there will be assignments, there will be projects, there will be deliverables in the class, okay, where you would have certain deadlines and dates within which you need to submit those deliverables. The professor would always be available during office hours, virtually of course, okay, so that you can meet the professor at any time you want during those office hours, but there will not be any class time per se. So that is basically what synchronous and asynchronous class means. Overall though, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, keep in mind that our online classes are as rigorous as an in-person class. At Appalachian, okay, whether our MBA is being delivered online or whether it's being delivered face-to-face, our rigor does not change. It's the same program. So even if you're taking an online class, please keep in mind that the rigor will always be there. There will be deliverables that you would be expected to complete and finish. There would be assignments, there would be exams, everything would be the same. It is only the delivery mode that changes.
The vast majority of our online MBA students are full-time working professionals, with many of them with families, with community obligations. So faculty and us in the graduate programs office are more than willing to work with you within reason to help you be successful in the program as well as maintain your commitments outside of the program with work, family, and whatnot. Interestingly, more than half of our MBA students did not have a business undergraduate degree. So if you're thinking, I can't go back for my MBA because I did not study business in college, that's just not the case. Many of our students studied something different. Their career path has led them into the business world or into a position where they need business knowledge to continue or to progress in their careers. The one benefit that you would have if you did study business is with the prerequisites that are required for the program. So we do ask that you have introductory coursework or knowledge of I think it's 6 core business disciplines. So we have economics, finance, marketing, management, statistics, and accounting. And if you've taken those courses at the undergraduate level and made a B- or better in them, then you would meet that prerequisite. If not, it doesn't affect your application, your eligibility for the program. It would just mean that you'd need to do a little bit of catch up. And one way that you can do that is through our accelerated prerequisite modules that we offer. So that is a self-paced program where you're working, students say it takes around 20 to 40 hours of time working through chapters, taking quizzes, and completing a final exam in that subject area. So you can work on that after you have been admitted to the program if need be. Of course, you also have the option of taking an undergraduate level course at a community college or at Appalachian, whatever is convenient for you. So we invite you to attend one of our MBA info sessions. Those are hosted by our MBA team, and we, including myself, and we will go into more depth about the application process, prerequisites, any other information that you would want or need to know to apply to the program. And we'll also have a Q&A time. Those sessions tend to be fairly informal, so you are more than welcome to speak up and voice your concerns or questions to us, and we'd be glad to help answer those for you. You can find out when those are scheduled on the website. They're typically on Thursday evenings, 5:30 via Zoom, and we do ask you to register for those. But if you have any other questions or would like to get in touch with us, please do so.
As I speak to incoming students, I get to see the excitement they have for this next phase of their lives. For some, they are the first in their families to go to college, and others are continuing a legacy of pursuing higher education. We know the journey through college is not always easy. Research tells us that obtaining a college education can be even more challenging for our students from underrepresented backgrounds. Appalachian Advocates is an opportunity to work with a cohort of faculty and staff who are willing to help foster a welcoming campus culture. Thank you for joining us.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing so well. I'm actually in my room right now at my apartment because today's video is actually going to be a little interview type thing that I'm going to do with my mom just to get some insight from a parent of a student at App State. So I'm going to call her, I'm going to video chat her and ask her a few questions, and we're going to get started. Hopefully she picks up. Okay, ready? Yeah. Everyone, this is my mom. You can say your name and a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Pat Raymond. I am Zoe's mom. I am from Trinidad, born and raised. I am the last of 3 girls. I have 3 kids, got married for 27 years. I've been working in the financial industry all my life since I was 18. Very fun, very outgoing, laid back. I'm very funny. I am funny. I think that's where Zoe gets her humor from.
All of that is true. I am really funny. So, first question is going to just be, what were your concerns when sending me off to college, or your thoughts, concerns, whatever it may be?
I was so afraid that Zoe would not make friends. I remember, I'm just telling you, I remember telling her, like, don't just stick around with your high school friends because it's easy, because she was going there with a pretty good group of high school friends. I'm like, you need to branch out, let your wings spread and fly and meet different people. And within a week or 2, I think it was, she was like, oh, yes. I signed up for a cappella and I joined the, what was it?
Oh, InterVarsity?
It was also that you would, I knew you would stick it out, but that you wouldn't get overwhelmed. She's in new surroundings, she's cooking for herself, she's washing her own clothes. You just hope that you taught enough that she can be her own.
That's kind of sad. I did make friends.
Why is it sad?
Because I guess I was shy. Keep having to turn the camera around because I want to get her and I want to get myself too, so that's what I'm doing. That's why that may seem crazy. What are your thoughts on me being a first-generation college student? If you didn't know, I am a first-generation college student. My dad he did online college for like 2 years. He got his associate's degree.
When I was leaving high school, it was not something that a lot of people did. A lot of people just went off to work, and you just, with your high school diploma, it got you a good job. It's not like now where you kind of have to have a degree to even get your foot in the door. I'm not going to lie, I always wanted to do it. I'm going to bawl. I'm going to cry. Because I know this is today's world. This is what you guys have to do. You just have to do it. It's just...
And a lot of people graduate and don't even work in what they studied, which is probably going to be my case.
But you're gonna be the first.
I'm gonna be the first.
But not the last.
But not the last. Because I have 2 younger siblings.
And actually, he was doing his essay today for App State.
Wait, he was?
Yeah. He was.
Oh,
he was,
stop!
Yeah.
I did not know my brother was going to be applying here.
And actually, he put you as one of the reasons that he said that, you know, you go there and you showed all these good things and...
I'm gonna cry. That actually brings me to my next question. Did you have any questions while going through the process of applications or when I first started here at App? Especially if you're a first-generation college student, we didn't know anything about a college application and how to do any of that.
I had no idea. I had never even seen the Common App. But you know what, Zoe? You did most of it yourself. You just needed a little bit of guidance from questions that they would have asked that were pertaining to your parents. Didn't seem like it was difficult. The flow was there. I think the only thing was proving your citizenship. I think they asked a couple times, and we had to send it, I think, more than once.
They did ask me about my citizenship a couple times because we only became citizens when I was a junior in high school. And then my last question to end this all off is, what advice do you have for other parents who have children who are about to go into college or already in college or even go to App?
Well, for children in particular, any parent who has a child going off, it's like I said before, you have to just hope that you've taught them enough and that you've showed them enough and you've led the way by example. A lot of parents seem to hold on, they call them the helicopter parents. You have to let them go. You have to know that they're going to do what's right, and if they don't, it's fine. They're going to make mistakes, just like we did. Find yourself a group of parents that you can go online and maybe say, hey, anybody know what's happening when parent weekend is? Anybody knows what time is they have to check out of their dorm today? Because not everybody knows. And to know that they have parents that are going through the same things that you are. You have to trust that they're adults. They have to do it alone. Of course, you're going to be there, but you have to let go and just let them.
Yeah, that was a good answer. You'll be okay. I'm okay. And I'll be graduating soon. I made it almost, kind of. That was my last question. Thanks, Mom, for doing this.
You're welcome, daughter.
I hope that you guys enjoyed this video.
Bye, guys.
I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Okay, bye.
When one arrives in Boone, you pretty quickly feel embraced by the mountains. The same thing happens here at the university. When you are a student here at the College of Business, you're embraced by the Appalachian community.
The name Appalachian State University, it means something and it connects with people. The experience goes beyond academics. There's a culture here. Everywhere I go, I wear that golden A. I take pride in that. It's not something that you find everywhere.
One of the things that's great about Appalachian is it has the resources of a big school, but the small school community.
Professors here take such an important view of how they can impact the lives of students.
That's the reason why we're here, supporting the students, seeing that they're successful both in their time here and then as they graduate.
We have a remarkable connection between faculty and students.
We have some of the leading voices in the field, so it really creates an intellectually vibrant environment.
You have the smaller class sizes, we have the high faculty engagement, and it really sets us apart.
These students are phenomenal. These students are, in my opinion, going to be the change seekers and change makers in the world, not only through their professional skills, but also because of the passion they have got for making this world a better place.
A lot of people think of school as coming to the classroom and then going home and doing homework. At the Walker College, it's not like that.
We're really trying to rethink how we deliver education, what the purpose of education is. Really trying to break that hierarchy of the professor being out in front with all the great ideas and instead saying, you know what, everybody has great ideas.
They're figuring out those solutions through innovative thinking, through an innovative process.
Innovation is the edge. We are trying very hard to push our students to think in ways that they can not only think outside the box, but what kind of positive impact they will be able to make in the world.
Having these different opportunities really sets our college apart.
We're trying to prepare the leaders of tomorrow by giving them ways of thinking about problems so they come up with solutions that are meaningful.
The students hit the ground running. They are the most technically competent, ready to go day one students. You know, when you get out into the business environment, that's the attitude you have to have.
Hiring an Appalachian graduate, as an employer, I know that I've got someone who can come in and hit the ground running.
One of the phrases you'll hear used often in the College of Business is business for good. We want our students going out in the world and helping to make it better by using business practices that can help.
I'm thankful for the transformational experience that Appalachian has given me. This college has shaped me both as a person and, I think, a servant leader.
Being a Mountaineer and being part of the Walker College of Business has shaped who I am today.
I'm really excited to enter the workforce with the skills that I've gained here. For me, Appalachian really represents family. You know, I don't know where I would be without my Appalachian experience. I'm proud to be a Mountaineer in so many ways.
Any student that comes out of the Walker College of Business is extraordinarily prepared to be successful and to make a difference in the world.
If you want to be able to work side by side with faculty, students, staff, community, partners, and industry, we want you to be part of our family.
Let's go! To a place where you can grow.
A place to be heard.
And take a closer look.
A place where you can crush it.
And push yourself.
A place to find your voice.
This place rocks. And rolls.
A place where you can get out.
Way out!
A place you'll never forget.
So where is this place? Let me show you.
Life is a journey. We're told that there are mountains and valleys before us. A mountaineer trudges through. Where others see an obstacle, a mountaineer sees an opportunity. A mountaineer climbs tomorrow's mountains today. So what is a mountaineer? A mountaineer is you.
What brings us to mountains? Is it the possibilities that await us at the top? Are we looking forward to how the challenge will mold us, transform us? Maybe the mountain is inside all of us. After all, we are mountaineers. Appalachian State University.